The starship palace of Queen Aloria floated silently in orbit above the sparkling blue world of Viridian. Its towers reached high into the thin clouds, shimmering with polished crystal and alien metals that reflected the twin suns. Inside, every corridor was lined with glowing panels, displaying maps of distant stars, holographic portraits of Zintrian ancestors, and intricate patterns that shifted like liquid light. The air hummed with energy, and the faint scent of exotic blossoms from the palace gardens below drifted upward. On this day, the palace buzzed with unusual tension. Couriers and aides hurried through the corridors, whispering in anxious tones. Queen Aloria's grandchild, Prince Kale, had done something no Zintrian child or adult had ever dared. He had shouted at a human. Not just shouted, but had called him a name so bold and shocking that the palace walls themselves seemed to quiver in disbelief. At the heart of the palace, in the grand audience chamber, the human ambassador, Jonathan Myers, stood calmly. He was tall, with a kind face, wearing the simple attire of his Earth colony. Despite the chaos around him, he smiled politely, his hands clasped behind his back. He had expected diplomacy to be delicate, but nothing in his training had prepared him for a Zintrian child calling him, well, something utterly outrageous. Prince Kale, a lively and curious 8-year-old, bounced on the tips of his feet, his golden eyes wide and sparkling with mischief. "Motherfucker, human," he had shouted earlier, during what was meant to be a polite greeting. The words echoed through the crystal hall, causing courtiers to gasp, guards to stiffen, and aides to cover their eyes in shock. Queen Aloria, the ruler of the Zintrians, was not easily startled. She had faced galactic rebellions, political betrayals, and interstellar crises without a tremor. But this unexpected insult from her own grandson made her nearly drop the ceremonial staff she carried. "Explain this," she demanded, her voice ringing with authority and incredulity. Her elaborate robe shimmered as she moved toward the scene, her presence commanding silence. Even the distant hum of the palace's energy systems seemed to pause. The courtiers and aides scrambled. "Your Majesty, it is the child," stammered one, unable to find words suitable for the moment. Another whispered urgently, "It is unusual, unprecedented." Jonathan Myers, however, remained calm. He raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "Your Majesty, I can explain," he said, his voice steady and warm. He bowed slightly, respecting the protocol without losing his composure. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Explain? My grandson has insulted you, human. How can you remain calm?" Jonathan's lips curved in a faint smile. "With respect, Your Majesty, the boy did not intend insult. He was curious, and he was repeating something he had heard. On Earth, sometimes children experiment with words they think are funny." "I have no offense taken," the Queen's staff muttered in horror. To tolerate such audacity from a child was one thing, but for a human to accept it without anger was unthinkable. Zintrians were raised to uphold the strictest manners and formalities. Every word, every gesture had to be precise. Even a whisper of irreverence was considered a serious breach. Prince Kyle giggled behind them, unaware of the storm his words had caused. "It's funny. He makes that smile like he knows a secret," he said, pointing at Jonathan. The Queen's eyebrows shot upward. "He knows a secret?" she repeated, her voice sharp. Her curiosity and authority battled inside her. She had to understand this. How could a human remain unaffected by such insolence? And why did the boy think it was funny? "Your Majesty," Jonathan said, stepping slightly forward, "humans are different. We use humor to connect even in tense situations. It is not disrespect. The boy is exploring language, seeing how it works." His expression was bold, yes, but playful, not harmful. A silence fell over the chamber. The courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. They had never heard of such a thing. Playfulness in words, especially using expressions considered impolite. It was beyond comprehension. Queen Aloria studied Jonathan carefully. His calm, unshaken demeanor was unusual. Zintrians were meticulous and cautious, and any insult would normally trigger sharp reactions. Yet here stood a human who seemed completely unshaken. "You expect me to believe," the Queen said slowly, "that a child has insulted you, and you are not angry?" Jonathan shook his head gently. "No, Your Majesty. On the contrary, it is impressive. The boy is fearless in ways that can be useful. He is curious and bold. He is testing boundaries, and he is learning. That is how humans grow." We admire courage even when it is unusual. Prince Kale looked up at him with wide eyes. You're not mad? He asked. Jonathan smiled warmly. Not at all, young prince. You were brave to speak your mind. And you made me laugh, which is a good thing. The queen gasped audibly. She could not imagine a Zintrian adult ever laughing at such a brazen display. The idea was foreign, almost impossible. Yet Jonathan's calm confidence and gentle humor made it difficult to deny the effectiveness of his approach. Curious, the queen muttered, almost to herself. This human teaches lessons without even intending to. His response unnerves yet intrigues me. The young prince bounced with excitement. See, he's funny. He's not angry at all. The courtiers shifted uneasily. Some whispered that the human must be hiding some secret power. Others feared that tolerating such behavior would set a dangerous precedent. Queen Aloria raised her hand, silencing the murmurs. Enough, she said. I demand to understand. Human. You will explain why you have allowed my grandchild to behave in such a manner without retribution. And you will tell me how he came to say that word. Jonathan nodded respectfully. Of course, your majesty. The word itself is a kind of earth humor. Children sometimes hear words in secret transmissions, stories, or from older humans. They repeat them without understanding the full weight. The boy likely found the expression shocking yet amusing and wanted to see my reaction. That is typical for curious children. Queen Aloria's mind raced. Children in Zintrian society were strictly disciplined from birth. Such boldness was unheard of. To see it tolerated or even enjoyed was beyond comprehension. And yet Jonathan's explanation made sense. His logic was strange yet effective. You're calm. It is remarkable, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. No Zintrian could remain unshaken in such a situation. Jonathan smiled faintly. Humans have a way of adapting, your majesty. We use humor, patience, and understanding to navigate moments that could otherwise be tense. It is part of what makes us resilient. The young prince, clearly proud of himself, turned to his grandmother. See, grandmother? Humans are amazing. They don't get mad like you always do. Queen Aloria blinked. She had always taught Kale that courage must be controlled, that respect demanded seriousness. Yet watching the human, she saw a new kind of strength. Quiet, calm, and unshakable. It was unlike anything she had encountered in her long life. Perhaps there is more to humans than I thought, she murmured. They are unpredictable yet effective. They can influence without force. That is a trait worth studying. Jonathan bowed slightly. I am honored, your majesty. My people are simple, but we value courage, intelligence, and the ability to face challenges without fear. Sometimes laughter is the most effective way to connect. Prince Kyle clapped his hands. I knew it. He's my favorite human ever. The courtiers gasped again, but the queen allowed a small, reluctant smile to appear on her face. She had never imagined she would see the day when her grandson's wild behavior was met with amusement rather than anger. As the audience continued, the queen realized that this human, through calmness, humor, and clever thinking, had demonstrated something truly remarkable. Humans were not just clever, they were fearless in ways Zintrians could barely understand. And perhaps, she thought, that fearlessness was a kind of strength that even the most advanced aliens could respect. Prince Kale ran up to Jonathan, tugging at his sleeve. Tell me more words. Tell me more funny things. Jonathan laughed quietly, kneeling to the boy's level. I will, young prince. But only if you promise to use them wisely and kindly. The prince nodded eagerly, and the queen watched silently from her throne. She realized that for the first time, she might be learning something from a human and even from her own grandson. And thus, in the glittering palace of Queen Aloria, an extraordinary lesson began that courage, humor, and a calm heart could challenge the strictest rules and win respect even among the stars. The crystal towers of the palace reflected the twin suns as Queen Aloria moved through the corridors toward the private audience chamber. The air shimmered with faint light from the walls, and holographic displays of the Zintrian star maps flickered gently as she passed. Every step she took echoed in the high ceilings, and every attendant followed at a careful distance. There was tension in the air, heavier than usual, for today the queen sought answers she could not ignore. Jonathan Myers, the human ambassador, had been summoned again. He had already proven calm in the face of Prince Kale's outrageous outburst. But now the queen wanted to understand the deeper reasons behind human behavior, and perhaps to test whether Jonathan's calmness was a clever trick or genuine strength. The audience chamber was a wide room with a polished floor that reflected the bright light from the ceiling. Elegant pillars spiraled toward the roof, adorned with delicate patterns that glowed faintly in shifting colors. In the center, a circular dais raised slightly above the floor marked the queen's throne. Jonathan waited, standing with his back straight, hands clasped politely in front of him. Prince Cale hovered near the doorway, bouncing on his toes, eager and impatient. The courtiers lingered along the walls, whispering among themselves, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Queen Eloria entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. She floated gracefully down the steps toward the floor, her robe shimmering in colors that reflected her moods. A Zintrian custom. Her golden eyes were sharp, focused, and unyielding. She stopped a few paces from Jonathan, observing him carefully. "Human," she began, her voice calm but firm. "You have remained unshaken in the face of my grandchild's behavior. You call it playfulness. You say it is harmless. Yet no Zintrian could remain so composed under such circumstances. Explain." Jonathan bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, my reaction is genuine. Humans are different from Zintrians in many ways. We value courage and curiosity. When a child tests limits, we do not always respond with anger. Instead, we may guide them, teach them, or simply observe. That is our way of learning." Queen Eloria raised an eyebrow. "Observe?" she repeated. "You mean you simply accept what could be considered an insult and do nothing?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "Not nothing, Your Majesty. We respond thoughtfully. Sometimes silence communicates more than a harsh word, and in this case the boy's words were intended to be humorous. By remaining calm, I allowed him to explore the limits of expression without harm. This teaches both of us something valuable." Prince Cale giggled behind Jonathan, tugging lightly at the human's sleeve. "See, grandmother? He's not mad at all. Isn't that amazing?" The queen's gaze flicked toward her grandson. She studied the child carefully, noting how fearless he seemed. Normally, Prince Cale would have been reprimanded instantly for such behavior. Yet here the human ambassador had not only avoided anger but had made the boy proud. "Interesting," the queen murmured. "Your tolerance is remarkable. But I must understand your reasoning. Explain to me fully why such behavior is acceptable to humans." Jonathan took a steady breath. "Your Majesty, humans grow through experience. We are not always the strongest or the fastest, but we have developed other strengths. Humor, curiosity, courage, and adaptability are some of our most valuable traits. A child testing boundaries, though bold, is part of that growth. By responding calmly, we allow learning without punishment, and we show that respect and understanding are stronger than anger or fear." The queen tilted her head, considering this. Zintrians prided themselves on logic, order, and strict adherence to rules. A society where laughter could outweigh discipline seemed chaotic, and yet there was a certain efficiency in Jonathan's approach. It disarmed conflict, encouraged learning, and demonstrated a calm intelligence she had not expected. "You say humans are adaptable?" she asked. "Able to face challenges without fear?" Jonathan nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. We rely on observation, understanding, and courage. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we succeed. But in every case we learn, and humor is one way we measure and teach resilience." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Curiosity and humor, as tools for strength?" Jonathan inclined his head. "Exactly. Even children can demonstrate insight if guided properly." The boy's words were shocking, but his intention was curiosity, not disrespect. And by responding without anger, I encouraged learning rather than fear. Prince Cale bounced excitedly, tugging at the edge of Jonathan's cloak. "Grandmother, he's teaching me jokes now." "And you laughed too." Queen Eoloria's lips twitched. She recalled the moment during the previous audience when Jonathan had smiled at the prince's antics, instead of scolding him. She had not expected it, and yet she had felt intrigued. A human could influence a child without force, without authority, and yet command attention and respect. "You have patience," she admitted reluctantly. "And yet your explanation seems almost illogical from a Zintrian perspective. I do not understand fully why a child should be allowed to behave in such a manner. In Zintrian society, discipline ensures survival and order." Jonathan's expression softened. "Your Majesty, humans survive through adaptability as well. We rely on intelligence, courage, and social understanding to thrive. Discipline is important, but so is the ability to respond creatively to unexpected situations. Children learn best when they explore, make mistakes, and understand consequences rather than by fear alone. The Queen considered this. Her mind, trained for centuries to value order above all, began to see the merit in Jonathan's reasoning. Perhaps humans had evolved strengths different from her own species, strengths that could surprise even the most advanced civilizations. You suggest that unpredictability, curiosity, and even humor can be a form of strength? She asked carefully. Jonathan nodded. Yes. Humans have many ways to influence situations without force. Humor and calmness can diffuse tension, create trust, and allow learning. Courage is not always about battle. It can be about facing the unknown without fear and teaching others by example. Even a child can demonstrate this. The Queen remained silent for a moment, studying him. The young prince tugged at her robes, trying to get her attention. Grandmother, isn't he amazing? Humans are so cool. A faint smile appeared on Queen Aeloria's face. Though she did not immediately show it, she realized that in the calm of Jonathan's presence she had learned something unexpected. Humans were not only clever, they were resilient, adaptable, and surprisingly influential, even without authority or force. Perhaps humans are underestimated, she said quietly, almost to herself. They survive not by strength alone, but by ingenuity and courage. Jonathan inclined his head respectfully. Your Majesty is wise to see this. We are not perfect, but our strengths often lie where others do not expect them, and children, like your grandson, often show the purest forms of curiosity and bravery. They test boundaries not to harm, but to learn. Prince Kale giggled. See, grandmother? He's teaching me secrets. Funny secrets. Queen Aeloria's gaze softened slightly. She watched as the human knelt down to speak gently to her grandson, explaining playful words and gestures from Earth. Even the smallest expressions carried meaning. Lessons in humor, the courtiers whispered among themselves, some in disbelief. A human could teach a Zintrian child without fear, without punishment, and without disrespecting the Queen's authority? Impossible. Yet here it was, happening before their eyes. Your patience, human. It is remarkable, the Queen admitted finally. And your methods. Unconventional. Yet I see merit. You turn potential chaos into understanding. Perhaps there is value in such approaches. Jonathan smiled faintly. Thank you, Your Majesty. My goal is to communicate, to understand, and to teach through example. In this way, humans and Zintrians can learn from one another. Prince Kale hugged Jonathan's leg. I want to learn more. Can we play more games and say more funny words? The Queen allowed a small chuckle to escape, surprising everyone. It was a rare sound even for her. She had begun to see that humor, calmness, and courage could teach lessons that rigid discipline alone never could. As the audience continued, Queen Aeloria realized something important. This human ambassador had done more than survive an outrageous insult. He had taught her a new form of strength, one that relied not on strict rules or fear, but on courage, curiosity, and the simple power of a calm heart. And in the glowing corridors of the palace under the twin suns of Viridian, the seeds of a new understanding began to grow. That humans, though seemingly ordinary, carried qualities that even the most advanced alien civilizations could respect, and perhaps one day even learn from. The bioluminescent gardens of the palace stretched endlessly beneath the floating towers. Strange flowers glowed in colors unseen on Earth, and delicate vines floated gently in the thin air, swaying as though moved by invisible hands. Soft streams of light cascaded from hovering crystal orbs, illuminating the winding paths where exotic creatures wandered. This place, normally serene and disciplined, now buzzed with the energy of curiosity, mischief, and learning. Prince Kale led Jonathan Myers along one of the glowing pathways, his golden eyes wide with excitement. Look, look! This one glows brighter when you touch it, the boy exclaimed, tapping a hovering flower. The petals shimmered and shifted from blue to violet, and tiny sparkles rose into the air. Jonathan chuckled. Amazing. Your species' gardens are truly remarkable, Prince Kale. They feel alive, almost like they understand joy. The prince bounced ahead, trailing laughter. And I want to show you more things. I learned so many words and I want to try them all. Jonathan shook his head with a grin. Let's take it slowly, young prince. Words have power, Some are playful, some are serious, and we must always choose wisely. The palace courtiers watched from a distance, whispering nervously. Normally, children were carefully supervised and every gesture was monitored. Yet here was a human, calmly walking with a prince who had already caused chaos in the grand audience. Together they explored, laughed, and experimented with new words, an unimaginable scene for Zintrian eyes. "Your Majesty," whispered one courtier to a nearby aide. "What is happening?" "The human is teaching the prince. Without discipline, he encourages playfulness." "Silence," the aide whispered back, eyes wide. "The queen is watching. Do not speak unless asked." Meanwhile, the queen observed from a balcony above. She stood in the cool light of the crystal panels, her robe shimmering in soft colors that reflected her curiosity. At first, she had been skeptical. Could a human truly teach a Zintrian child without causing disrespect or disorder? Now she saw the answer unfolding before her eyes. The young prince laughed and clapped his hands. "Try this one, Jonathan." "Say it with me." He squealed a string of playful syllables, a word-like expression from Earth that sounded strange even to human ears. Jonathan repeated it carefully, pronouncing each sound with gentle humor. "Like this, Prince Kyle?" he asked. "Yes, exactly." "That's perfect," the prince shouted. He twirled in delight, then turned to show a small group of hovering palace assistants who looked horrified. What is he doing?" One assistant whispered in alarm. Queen Aloria, still observing, allowed a faint smile to appear. She had to admit it. Jonathan's methods worked. The prince was learning, laughing, and exploring language in ways she had never imagined possible. And yet order was not entirely lost. No one had been harmed. No rule had been broken in any serious way, and the prince seemed genuinely engaged and respectful, even while mischievous. Jonathan knelt to the prince's level, speaking quietly. "Words can be fun, Kale, but they are also tools. We must learn when to use them carefully. You can make people laugh or you can make them confused. Understanding the difference is important." Prince Kale nodded enthusiastically. "I understand. I will be careful. But also funny." Jonathan smiled. "Exactly. That's the spirit." The queen, watching silently, felt an unfamiliar sense of intrigue. Humans, she realized, were unpredictable. Their behavior seemed illogical, even reckless, but it carried subtle wisdom. A child could be guided without fear, and learning could be joyful rather than forced. This was new. "Perhaps humans possess strengths different from our own," she murmured almost to herself. "Curiosity, adaptability, courage, and even humor can be tools of influence." The prince ran ahead to a sparkling pond, its waters glowing softly from bioluminescent algae. He splashed carefully, making the water shimmer and ripple in mesmerizing patterns. Jonathan followed, observing and laughing quietly at the child's antics. "Your Majesty," Jonathan said, pointing to the rippling pond, "humans often learn through play. We explore, experiment, and understand the world by trying things ourselves. Children especially benefit from freedom to test limits under guidance. It helps them grow stronger, wiser, and more confident." The queen's eyes narrowed. Freedom, under guidance, a delicate balance. She had always taught Zintrians that discipline alone ensured survival. Yet watching the scene, she saw that this approach, the human approach, was effective. The child was learning, listening, and yet discovering new ideas through his own experiences. Prince Kyle splashed Jonathan gently, laughing as the water shimmered between them. "See? You have to try. It's funny." Jonathan laughed softly. "Careful, Prince Kale. We do not want to make a mess of the gardens." The prince pouted dramatically for a moment, then giggled, realizing the humor in the human's careful tone. He had never encountered someone so patient, so steady, and yet so willing to join in the fun. It was surprising and delightful. A group of palace aides hovered nearby, their eyes wide. They whispered anxiously among themselves, "This is not proper. The human encourages play, and the prince behaves without restraint. What is the queen thinking?" But the queen did not answer them. She had already made a decision. Observing the interaction, she recognized a rare kind of intelligence. Humans could influence others not through fear or authority, but through patience, guidance, and humor. Their unpredictability was not chaos, it was a strength. Prince Kale, excited by the shimmering pond, shouted another playful word from Earth, a phrase he had learned from Jonathan. The word echoed across the garden, causing flowers to glow brighter and small creatures to scatter in surprise. The queen chuckled softly, despite herself. She had never expected to laugh at such a scene, yet the moment was undeniably clever. The human ambassador had turned a child's mischief into a lesson, a game, and a display of curiosity, all without anger or punishment. Jonathan knelt beside the prince, speaking gently. Remember, Kale, words are like tools. We can use them to create joy, to teach, or to understand. Using them wisely makes us stronger, and it shows respect. The prince nodded seriously, though a mischievous twinkle remained in his eyes. I will use them wisely, but I will also be funny. The queen observed quietly from above. She realized that humans' methods were subtle yet effective. Courage, patience, humor, and curiosity. These traits allowed them to influence even the most disciplined and serious beings. The young prince was learning important lessons, not just about words, but about understanding others, taking risks, and exploring ideas. A small commotion arose near the glowing vines as Prince Kale tried to repeat another playful word. The flowers responded, shimmering and twisting in unusual patterns. Jonathan guided him carefully, explaining the meanings behind the words and helping him see how language could be playful, expressive, and even educational. The courtiers watched in amazement. They had expected disorder and chaos, yet the prince was focused, attentive, and clearly learning. Even more surprising, the human ambassador seemed to strengthen the child's confidence rather than undermine authority. Queen Eloria's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps humans were not only clever, they were adaptive, resilient, and uniquely capable of guiding others in ways Zintrians had never considered. Humor, patience, and courage could be tools for influence, teaching, and leadership. Prince Kale bounded toward a glowing bridge that arched over a small waterfall. Come on, Jonathan. You have to try this one. Jonathan followed, laughing quietly. Careful, Prince Kale. Balance is important too. Words are not the only tools we must learn to use wisely. The prince laughed, realizing the lesson. He balanced carefully on the bridge, repeating playful earth expressions while Jonathan guided him with gentle encouragement. Each step was a game, a learning experience, and a demonstration of human-style teaching. The queen, still watching from her balcony, allowed a rare smile to spread across her face. She had learned an important lesson herself. Humans could teach, influence, and guide without authority, without anger, and without fear. Their strength lay in creativity, patience, and adaptability, a type of intelligence that even the most advanced Zintrians could admire. As the twin suns of Viridian dipped lower in the sky, casting long glowing shadows across the gardens, Queen Eloria realized that this human ambassador, and her grandson, were beginning to change the way she thought about education, guidance, and leadership. And so, in the glowing, living gardens of the palace, a new understanding grew that courage, humor, and curiosity could be as powerful as rules, order, and tradition, and that sometimes the most unexpected teachers were the ones who challenged the ordinary and made learning an adventure. The grand banquet hall of Queen Eloria's palace shimmered with light from thousands of crystal chandeliers. Each crystal reflected the twin suns of Viridian, scattering rainbows across the polished floors. The long, elevated tables were filled with alien dignitaries from across the galaxy, their shimmering robes and elaborate designs reflecting their rank and culture. The scent of exotic dishes drifted through the air, a mixture of savory, sweet, and unfamiliar aromas that seemed to make some guests uneasy. At the center of it all, Queen Eloria sat upon her throne, her golden eyes surveying the gathering with authority and poise. She had invited Jonathan Myers, the human ambassador, and her grandson, Prince Kale, to attend the banquet. What the queen did not know was that this evening would challenge everything she believed about decorum, diplomacy, and influence. Prince Kale, dressed in formal Zintrian attire that shimmered in shades of gold and blue, squirmed slightly in his seat. He had been practicing words and playful expressions that Jonathan had taught him, and he was eager to see how the dignitaries would react. Jonathan sat calmly beside the boy, his posture straight, his hands resting lightly on the table. He had observed the prince's excitement and curiosity, knowing that the upcoming event could test human patience and influence in unexpected ways. The banquet began with the ceremonial lighting of the crystal chandeliers. an ancient Zintrian tradition meant to honor guests and ancestors alike. The dignitaries offered polite greetings, their voices harmonizing in strange, melodic tones. Everything was precise, formal, and orderly, a perfect display of Zintrian culture. "Remember, Kale," Jonathan whispered gently. "Observe first, then speak. Humor is powerful, but timing matters." The prince nodded eagerly, leaning forward. "I will, I promise." As the first course was served, a shimmering liquid that shifted colors in the bowl, Prince Kale whispered a playful phrase from Earth under his breath. Jonathan smiled quietly, encouraging him with a subtle nod. At first, the dignitaries noticed nothing. Their attention remained on the ceremonial proceedings and the elaborate etiquette expected at such an event. But then, Prince Kale repeated the phrase, this time louder, emphasizing certain syllables for dramatic effect. He started, and Jonathan gently interrupted him, smiling and leaning closer. "Careful, Kale," he whispered softly. "Say it in the playful way we practiced. You will see." The prince's golden eyes sparkled as he followed Jonathan's guidance. He delivered the playful Earth expression with a humorous twist, his tone mischievous but innocent. A murmur spread through the room. The dignitaries froze, unsure how to react. The queen's eyes narrowed. She had seen the boy call a human ambassador outrageous words before, but now he was performing them in front of the entire galaxy's elite. And yet, instead of chaos, the room began to shift. Some dignitaries looked confused, others suppressed small smiles, and a few, unexpectedly, laughed softly. The tension, which had filled the hall moments before, began to dissolve. The humor was subtle, yet effective. Jonathan leaned closer to the prince, whispering encouragement. "Well done. See? Humor can create connection. It shows courage, cleverness, and understanding. You've captured attention without disrespect." Prince Kale grinned, realizing the impact of his words. He repeated another playful phrase, this time with exaggerated gestures he had learned from Jonathan. The dignitaries chuckled openly, and the air of strict formality began to lighten. The queen studied the scene carefully. At first, she felt a flicker of irritation. Protocol had been disrupted, and her guests were reacting unpredictably. But as she observed, she began to see the subtle genius of the human approach. Jonathan had taught the prince to use humor as a tool. The boy was demonstrating courage, creativity, and intelligence, all qualities the queen valued, yet in a form she had never expected. The human ambassador had turned potential embarrassment into diplomacy, turning laughter into influence. A Zintrian diplomat leaned toward another, whispering nervously, "The human, he is teaching the prince, but without authority. And yet, everyone is laughing and listening." Queen Aloria's eyes sparkled with curiosity. This was remarkable. Humans, she realized, possessed a strength Zintrians rarely understood, the ability to influence without force, to lead through subtle guidance, and to inspire respect through patience and humor. Prince Kale, encouraged by the response, began to repeat playful Earth words that sounded strange even to Jonathan. The human guided him carefully, teaching tone, timing, and expression. The dignitaries continued to laugh softly, their earlier stiffness replaced by amusement and engagement. The queen allowed herself a small smile. She had to admit it. The human ambassador had achieved something extraordinary. The boy had demonstrated courage and creativity, yet respect and diplomacy remained intact. Humor, she realized, could be a tool for connection, for teaching, and for leadership. Jonathan spoke quietly to the prince. "See, Kale, humor is more than laughter. It can show understanding, build trust, and influence even the most serious minds. You are learning to use your words wisely and courageously." The prince nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson. "I understand, Jonathan. I will use it wisely and make them smile." As the main course was served, a glowing dish of floating fruits and shimmering liquids, Prince Kale continued his playful antics under Jonathan's guidance. Each phrase, Each gesture was delivered with confidence, creativity, and a spark of mischief. The dignitaries laughed more freely, and the atmosphere shifted from rigid formality to engaged curiosity. Queen Eloria observed silently, reflecting on what she had learned. Humans were unpredictable, bold, and clever. Their methods of influence were unlike anything Zintrians had developed. Discipline and rules were not their only tools. Courage, humor, patience, and adaptability allowed them to inspire, teach, and connect. The Queen realized that humans' strength was not in their technology, their numbers, or even their diplomacy alone. It was in their character, their ability to face challenges without fear, to adapt, to guide others, and to use creativity as a form of leadership. Prince Kale's final performance involved a playful mimic of a dignitary's formal gesture, exaggerated for humor, but delivered with respect. The room erupted in laughter. Even the most serious guests found themselves smiling. The Queen could not help but chuckle softly herself. She leaned forward slightly on her throne, her golden eyes sparkling with admiration. "Perhaps humans are underestimated," she murmured. "Their influence lies not in force but in courage, intelligence, and creativity. Even a child can demonstrate wisdom when guided properly." Jonathan bowed slightly to the Queen, acknowledging her observation. "Your Majesty, humans are simple, yet resilient. We may not always be the strongest, but we can inspire, teach, and influence in ways unexpected. Courage, curiosity, humor, and patience are some of our greatest tools." Prince Kale bounced in his seat, satisfied with the attention and laughter he had created. "See? Grandmother, humans are amazing." The Queen allowed herself a full smile, rare and genuine. She realized that this human ambassador had done more than survive the audacious words of her grandson. He had demonstrated a new form of strength, the power of calmness, patience, guidance, and humor. He had turned chaos into connection, curiosity into learning, and mischief into diplomacy. As the banquet continued, the atmosphere remained warm and engaging. The dignitaries, now relaxed, interacted with curiosity and interest, rather than rigid formality. Prince Kale leaned closer to Jonathan, whispering, "I want to learn more words, more fun things." Jonathan nodded. "We will, Prince Kale. But remember, wisdom guides humor. The strongest leaders know when to act, when to speak, and when to make others smile." The Queen watched the pair with quiet admiration. She realized that humans' unpredictability, their courage to speak and act without fear, and their creativity could challenge even the most disciplined and advanced societies. They were not just clever, they were remarkable. And so as the twin suns of Viridian set, casting long glowing shadows across the glittering banquet hall, Queen Eloria came to a revelation. Humans' greatest strength lay not in weapons, technology, or numbers, but in character, intelligence, and heart. A single human could influence even the most rigid society, teach courage to a child, and transform formality into engagement. Prince Kale, energized by the evening, whispered one last playful word to Jonathan, who repeated it carefully, guiding the boy's expression and tone. The dignitaries laughed once more, and the Queen allowed herself to smile fully, acknowledging the quiet power of humanity. In that moment, the palace of Queen Eloria understood something profound. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and courageous. They could inspire, teach, and influence in ways no one had expected, and even a mischievous child guided by such a human could turn tradition into a lesson of courage, humor, and intelligence. The twin suns of Viridian rose slowly, bathing the palace in soft golden light. The glittering towers reflected the warmth, making the crystal walls glow like molten glass. Birds with translucent wings sang in the gardens below, their songs echoing softly through the corridors. Despite the serenity of the morning, there was a sense of anticipation in the palace. Today, the human ambassador Jonathan Myers would depart. His visit had been brief, but his influence on the young Prince Kale and even on Queen Eloria herself would leave a lasting mark. Prince Kale rushed through the corridors to find Jonathan. His golden eyes shone with excitement and his small hands clenched in eager anticipation. Jonathan, are you ready to leave? He asked, bouncing on his toes. I learned so many things, and I want to remember all of them. Jonathan smiled warmly. I am ready, Prince Kale, and I am proud of how much you have learned. Courage, curiosity, and humor. Those are the lessons that matter most. The Queen observed from her throne in the Grand Hall, her expression a mixture of pride, amusement, and curiosity. She had watched the human ambassador guide her grandson with patience and wisdom, turning mischief into learning, and playfulness into diplomacy. Never had a visitor left such a profound impression on her palace, or on her perception of humanity. Prince Kale, the Queen said, her voice calm but firm, today you will bid farewell to Jonathan. Remember all that you have learned and carry it forward wisely. Humor, courage, and curiosity are gifts, but they must always be guided by respect. The young prince saluted playfully. Yes, grandmother, I will. And I will make him proud! Jonathan knelt to the boy's level, his hand resting lightly on Kale's shoulder. You have learned well, young prince. Remember, humor and courage are tools, but understanding and kindness are their foundation. Use them wisely and you will influence the world around you. Prince Kale grinned. I will, Jonathan. I promise. The palace aides prepared the human ambassador for departure. A sleek silver shuttle awaited him in the landing bay, its engines silent but humming with stored energy. The corridors echoed with the soft footsteps of servants, courtiers, and guards, all curious to witness this final moment. Queen Eloria approached Jonathan, her robes shimmering softly as she moved. She looked directly into his eyes, her golden gaze intense and unwavering. Human, she said, your visit has been extraordinary. You have demonstrated courage, patience, and wisdom. You have taught my grandson lessons I could not teach alone. Thank you. Jonathan bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, it has been an honor. Your grandson is clever, brave, and curious. He will grow into a wise and strong leader. I have learned much from him as well. Prince Kale tugged lightly at Jonathan's sleeve. Do not forget me. I will practice all the words and tricks you taught me. Jonathan laughed softly. I could never forget you, Kale. Remember, learning never ends, and your courage and curiosity will take you far. The Queen watched silently, reflecting on the past days. Humans were unlike any species she had encountered. They did not rely solely on rules, technology, or tradition. Their strength lay in their character, their courage, humor, patience, and adaptability. These traits had allowed one human ambassador to guide a Zintrian prince, influence alien dignitaries, and even reshape the Queen's understanding of leadership and diplomacy. Your Majesty, Jonathan said, sensing her thoughts, humans are simple yet resilient. We adapt, we learn, and we teach through example. Even small actions guided by courage and understanding can leave a lasting mark. The Queen nodded slowly. Indeed, I have seen it for myself. Perhaps we have underestimated humans for too long. Their influence is subtle but powerful. Even the smallest gestures can create change. Prince Kale tugged at Jonathan's hand. Come on, let's go. I want to wave goodbye to the palace. Jonathan held the boy's hand gently as they walked through the palace gardens one last time. The flowers glowed softly, their colors shifting with the sunlight, and the small creatures of Viridian peeked from the foliage, watching the unusual pair. Prince Kale waved enthusiastically at every corner, shouting playful words he had learned from Jonathan. The Queen followed from a distance, her expression thoughtful. She had learned a lesson she would not forget. Influence was not only about authority, discipline, or power. Sometimes it was about courage, humor, and the ability to guide others through understanding rather than fear. In the landing bay, the sleek silver shuttle waited silently. Its doors opened, revealing the interior softly illuminated in warm light. Jonathan guided Prince Kale inside, kneeling once more to speak quietly. Kale, he said, remember what you have learned. Humor, courage, and curiosity are your strengths. Use them wisely and you will inspire others. And always remain kind even when the world seems harsh. The prince nodded solemnly. I understand, Jonathan. I will always remember. Jonathan smiled and rose. And I will remember you, Kale. You are a brave, clever, and curious young prince. Continue to explore, learn, and grow. One day you will lead with courage and wisdom. Prince Kale hugged Jonathan tightly. Goodbye. And thank you for everything. Jonathan returned the hug gently. Goodbye, young prince. And thank you for teaching me as well. As the shuttle prepared for departure, the Queen approached, her regal presence commanding attention. She regarded Jonathan carefully, her expression one of respect and acknowledgement. "Human," she said, her voice steady. "Your influence has been remarkable. You have taught my grandson courage, curiosity, and the power of humor. You have shown patience, wisdom, and understanding in ways I have rarely witnessed. For this I thank you." Jonathan bowed once more. "Your Majesty, it has been my honor. Humans are not perfect, but we strive to learn, to guide, and to connect. I am grateful for the opportunity to witness your culture and to learn from your wisdom as well." The Queen's golden eyes softened. "Go with my blessing, human. Your visit will be remembered, and your lessons will endure." Prince Kyle waved energetically as the shuttle lifted off, rising smoothly into the sky. The twin suns reflected off its silver surface, creating a dazzling display of light that caught the attention of every observer. The young prince laughed and shouted playful words from Earth. And for the first time, the Queen allowed herself a full, genuine smile. "Perhaps," she murmured softly, "humans are underestimated indeed. Their strength is subtle yet powerful. They teach courage, patience, humor, and wisdom. And even one human can leave a lasting mark on a palace, a prince, and a queen." As the shuttle disappeared into the vast sky, Prince Kyle turned to the Queen, eyes bright with excitement. "Grandmother, I will practice everything Jonathan taught me. One day I will make him proud." Queen Aloria studied her grandson, recognizing the growth in him. He had learned courage, curiosity, and humor, all guided by the human ambassador. She realized that humans' unique qualities, their patience, adaptability, and creativity, could change the way leaders approached guidance, diplomacy, and influence. The palace felt different now, though nothing had changed outwardly. The lessons of the human ambassador lingered in the air. Courage could inspire, humor could teach, and understanding could influence. Even in a society built on precision, discipline, and strict rules, the human approach had shown that strength came in many forms. Prince Kale bounced happily, repeating playful words one last time before heading to the palace gardens. The Queen followed, reflecting on the human ambassador's visit and the lessons it had brought. She realized that humans were remarkable not for their technology or power, but for their character, their creativity, and their courage. And so the palace of Queen Aloria began a new chapter. The lessons of a human ambassador, the power of humor, patience, courage, and curiosity, would endure in the hearts of its people. Prince Kale would grow into a leader guided not only by discipline, but also by creativity and understanding. And the Queen herself would remember the quiet strength of humanity, a force subtle, clever, and extraordinary in its simplicity. As the twin suns climbed higher into the sky, casting warm light over the palace towers, the halls echoed softly with laughter and quiet reflection. Humanity had left its mark not through force or authority, but through courage, humor, and the power of a calm, understanding heart. And somewhere far above Viridian, the human ambassador looked down on the palace one last time, smiling quietly. His mission had been brief, but the lessons he had shared and the mark he had left would endure across worlds, generations, and hearts.